Hey guys, tonight we're traveling up, up, way up, until your lungs start to feel like they've been politely vacuum sealed. Welcome to the Andes, where the mountains scrape the clouds and the potatoes outnumber people, dogs, and probably even gods. You're not here for a resort. You're here for something much weirder, to find out how priests in ancient Andean civilizations used potatoes. Yes, actual dirt-covered spuds to measure time. Now that might sound like something you'd do while bored during a long quarantine, but no, this is serious, sacred, tubers with purpose. The wind whistles sharp through the thin air as you climb a narrow, stone-carved path, past mossy terraces that once held maize, quinoa, and ceremonial llamas. In the distance, snow clings to mountain tops, like powdered sugar on a forgotten pastry. And you? You're wheezing just slightly, questioning your life choices. You probably won't survive this. I mean, you'll be fine. But your iPhone certainly won't. No GPS, no clocks. And unless you're really confident in your sun position guessing skills, you're going to need a potato. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. Bonus points if you're already curled up under a blanket with your own ceremonial snack. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start walking again, following a man wrapped in layered alpaca wool. He doesn't say much, but his belt is lined with dried potatoes. Small, wrinkly, each one a different shade of beige or purple. You think, this guy either really loves snacks or he's got secrets. Turns out, both are true. He's what passes for a priest up here, a keeper of seasonal rhythms, master of rituals, and occasional weather consultant. The villagers revere him because he knows when to plant, when to pray, and when to throw mildly drunken festivals involving flutes and fermented corn juice. And according to him, potatoes are the reason why. As the trail levels out, you reach a ceremonial platform overlooking a valley. Below, patchwork farms unfurl like a mossy quilt. A few alpacas mill about, looking bored. The priest offers you a sip from a gourd, something tangy and thick, with the aftertaste of smoked moss. You politely pretend to enjoy it. He nods. You've passed the first test. Nearby, a fire crackles gently. The priest takes one of the small potatoes from his belt, holds it to the flames for exactly 11 heartbeats, then places it on a flat stone marked with lines and carvings. You watch it steam and slowly split open. This, he explains with the reverence of someone unveiling a sacred text, is how they measure short intervals, ritual durations, prayer lengths, or the time it takes to boil water at this altitude without weeping. One mainstream historical fact you should know: the Andean peoples, from the Wari to the Inca, had no written language as we define it, no alphabet. Instead, they used a sophisticated system of knotted cords called quipu to track information. But for some things, ephemeral, seasonal, or ceremonial, they relied on timekeepers like our priest here and his magical root vegetables. Quirky tidbit of the night. Some of these potatoes weren't just grown. They were bred over generations for their timing properties. Yes, timing. Want a 7-minute boil? Use the stumpy yellow one. Need 23 minutes and a slight chance of mystical visions? The purple long boy's your guy. Historians still argue whether these timing rituals were truly precise or just symbolic. Some suggest they were paired with chants or sun positions for added accuracy. Others believe the potato was mostly a memory aid, like tying a string around your finger, if your finger were starchy and slightly poisonous raw. But whatever the science behind it, the culture treated it as real. You can feel it in the way the priest cradles each tuber like a relic, murmuring soft Quechua invocations under his breath. As twilight creeps in, The sky turns a soft amber, and a chill settles over your borrowed poncho. Somewhere far off, a conch horn sounds, marking the end of a fasting hour, or possibly a llama parade. Hard to tell up here. You sit cross-legged beside the fire, your breath rising in clouds. The priest pulls out another potato, this one dark, red and shriveled like a wise old man's face, and carefully places it on the fire-heated stone. He watches. He waits. You wait too. And just as your eyelids start to drift downward, he claps once. The potato has split, perfectly aligned with the moment the first star appears in the sky. That star, he says, marks the star-watching hour. A time when stories are told, drinks are shared, and absolutely nothing useful gets done. You're starting to like this place. The priest stands slowly, brushing ash from his woven sash, and gestures for you to follow. You do, not entirely sure if he's about to reveal ancient wisdom or offer you another questionable gourd of fermented potato brine. But you're committed, now physically, spiritually, and possibly gastronomically. You walk. He leads you along a narrow trail lined with flat stones, some smooth, others cracked, most engraved with spirals and tiny indents shaped like stars, suns, or maybe llama hooves. The altitude is still rude, but the view helps. Valleys, spread below like ancient green oceans, with clouds pouring over cliff edges in slow motion. As you crest a ridge, the priest stops at a circular clearing flanked by squat stone huts. From inside one, a small boy emerges holding, of course, a bundle of potatoes tied together with bright yarn. He offers it up like a bouquet. You nod solemnly, accepting it like a sacred prize. Secretly, you wonder if it's rude to eat one. This is where you meet another figure, older than the priest, with long silver braids and a face like crumpled parchment. She's a timekeeper, too, but not of stars or fire. No, her job is far more tactile. She counts time by the weight and softness of raw tubers carried in her woven sling. She hums as she works, soft, tuneless, but oddly comforting. Here's the thing. In a world without clocks, time has texture. A priest knows it's midday when the potato he plucked at dawn has lost just enough moisture in the mountain air. It's not exact, but neither is time, really. Especially when your days are tied more to the land than to a calendar. Mainstream fact break. While we know the Inca Empire was vast and structured, many of its timekeeping practices were decentralized. Local priests and astronomers used astronomy, shadow sticks, and yes, natural cues like plant behavior to track time for planting, religious festivals, and military campaigns. And then there's the Spud Squad. Not the official title, but it should be. These were potato priests, tuber keepers, assigned to monitor environmental changes through their baskets of aging potatoes. They would leave certain ones exposed to air, bury others in moss or sand, and compare their decay rates over days, or even weeks. Think science experiment, but with way more potato gossip. You're invited to try. The silver-haired woman hands you 2 potatoes. Both are cool to the touch, speckled with dust and wisdom. One is soft, the other alarmingly firm, like it could survive a minor avalanche. You're told to hold them in your palms until your body warmth changes their scent. The one that begins to smell first, she says cryptically, knows the hour. You wait, and you smell. And eventually, one gives off a faint, earthy aroma, with hints of root cellar and distant campfire. The priest nods, tapping the sky. Somewhere behind you, a bird cries out. Apparently, you've just experienced the passage of a ceremonial quarter hour. Scholars still argue whether this method was ceremonial or genuinely functional. Some claim the potato's role in timekeeping was metaphorical, symbolizing cycles, decay, and rebirth. Others suggest real experimental observation played a part, particularly in areas where written or mathematical time wasn't prioritized. But let's be honest, if you're a priest living on a cliff with 30 kinds of potatoes and no sundial, In sight, you're going to get creative. One quirky tidbit. In some parts of the Andes, priests would rub potatoes with sacred herbs before placing them in the sun. Not just for timing, but also as a divination practice. If the potato dried unevenly, it meant weather trouble ahead. If it grew a tiny sprout, fertility was in your future. If it exploded spontaneously, well, that was probably just altitude, pressure. Still, the villagers listened. Back in the clearing, a small crowd gathers. Children giggle as they toss miniature potatoes into a woven hoop. Elders chat while peeling papery skins off fingerling varieties destined for the night's soup. And your priest guide sits cross-legged with another visitor, showing him how to line up spuds along a sunbeam to predict when the wind will change. Everything is slow here, rhythmic, measured not by seconds, but by seasons. And you're beginning to feel it in your own body, a soft deceleration like shifting down into a gentler gear. As the light begins to tilt and shadows lengthen, you notice the priest setting aside several potatoes, his most sacred, maybe. He lines them up on a stone ledge, each at a slightly different angle. He says nothing, but you watch as he leans close, nose nearly touching, breathing in as if to hear their answer. Then he says a word. Kilak. The moon hour. He points. To the east, where the first pale shimmer of moonrise slides above a jagged peak. You didn't hear a bell, you didn't see a clock, but somehow the potatoes knew, and maybe, just maybe, so do you. The moon rises with the kind of slow grace only ancient moons can muster. It casts a silver sheen over everything. The potatoes, the priest, even your somewhat confused but increasingly enchanted self. You sit quietly, watching your breath curl. In the crisp night air, listening to the soft rustle of woven skirts, distant flutes, and the occasional sneeze from an alpaca. The priest now gestures toward a stone basin near the center of the clearing. It's filled with water so still it reflects the stars like a mirror. He plucks a particular potato, round, bruised with a stripe of green, and drops it gently into the water. You expect a splash. There is none. It just sinks slowly, almost thoughtfully, until it rests at the bottom like a sleepy rock. He begins to chant. Soft syllables drift into the night, more rhythm than language. Everyone else grows quiet, including a chicken that had been making bold declarations near a hut. The chant grows slower, deeper, as the moon climbs higher. This is what they did instead of setting timers. No buzzing phones, no blinking microwave clocks, just water, gravity, and a root vegetable performing a slow-motion descent. When it touches the basin floor, the chant stops. Ceremony begins. You're not sure what's being summoned, or if this is more of a bless the quinoa harvest situation, but the atmosphere is powerful, and honestly, a little hypnotic. Mainstream fact incoming, scholars have confirmed that Andean societies used water clocks of a kind, but their timing bowls weren't standardized. Each region developed its own variant using available materials: obsidian, clay, even carved wood. Potatoes, being abundant and wonderfully absorbent, added a tactile, biological variable to the mix. Sort of like a potato-shaped hourglass that also moonlighted as lunch. The priest drains the basin slowly. The water, now sacred and probably a bit starchy, is ladled into smaller bowls and passed around. You sip yours cautiously. It tastes like earthy silence and ghost potatoes. Quirky tidbit. Some communities swore that the longer a potato took to sink, the more spiritually in tune it was. Particularly slow sinkers were set aside, dried, and eventually worn as amulets. These lucky spuds were believed to whisper prophecies in dreams, though possibly that was just the effect of mild tuber poisoning. Historians still argue whether this potato water method actually tracked ritual time, or if it was more about setting the mood. After all, Timing in sacred practice wasn't always about precision. It was about intention and vibes. Lots and lots of ceremonial vibes. The priest hands you another potato. This one is striped and oddly warm, like it's been prepped for something dramatic. He points to a nearby alcove in the cliff wall, lit by flickering torches and lined with strange shadow shapes. You follow, potato in hand. Inside, the walls are painted with swirling patterns, stars, spirals, and what appears to be a giant guinea, pig wearing a crown. You assume there's a story behind that. Maybe several. But for now, your focus is on the central figure. A stone altar shaped like a half-moon, its surface dotted with shallow indentations. Your priest companion beckons you forward, motioning for you to place the potato in one of the hollows. You do. It fits perfectly, like a key in a lock. He then points to a notch in the wall where moonlight is now sliding in like a silver blade. The light hits your potato directly and the room exhales. Not literally, but it feels that way. The timing, he explains, must match the moon's position, with the correct phase of your selected tuber. Each potato shape corresponds to a lunar emotion. Some bring clarity, others restlessness, and a few apparently signal digestive issues. Good to know. And then something oddly beautiful happens. The other hollowed potatoes around the altar begin to glow, ever so faintly. Not because they're magic. Because the moonlight, refracted from polished quartz crystals embedded in the cave wall, is being redirected in tiny glints. The ancients, it turns out, had a knack for sacred disco lighting. Your breath catches. Not because anything supernatural is happening, probably, but because for a second time really does feel still. Like the moment has pressed pause. In the Andes, time isn't something you check. It's something you participate in. Another. Whisper from the historical record. Many of these rituals were tied not just to astronomy, but to community rhythms. Potatoes weren't just timers. They were ceremonial co-stars. Their growth cycles, decay rates, and even their seasonal availability told people when to act, when to rest, and when to gather under a starlit cliff to sing to the moon. The priest ends the ritual with a low hum, gestures you out of the alcove, and the night wraps around you like a heavy blanket. Stars flicker above in impossible numbers. Far below, a torch line winds through the valley. Other villagers returning from their own altars, their own root-based revelations. You walk back slowly, feeling the weight of your ceremonial potato in your hand like a quiet clock that's always right. The chill deepens as you return to the clearing, where the fire has been stoked back to life. Sparks drift lazily upward like ancient fireflies, lighting up the darkened sky in flickers of orange and gold. The wind whispers in low, slow sighs, as if the mountains themselves are beginning to murmur bedtime stories. You pull your poncho tighter around your shoulders, the woven fabric rough against your skin, but warming in the way only something handmade, and perhaps slightly enchanted, can be. The priest is crouched near the fire, his weathered hands moving, deliberately. He's holding something new now, a wide, low bowl made of dark clay, its surface etched with looping glyphs and small sunbursts that catch and hold shadows. He sets it down with the care one might reserve for a sleeping animal or an elder's diary. From a nearby pouch, he retrieves what looks like mashed potato, but not the buttery kind your grandma used to make. This is grayer, wetter, and somehow wiser. It smells faintly of cold soil and time itself. You suppress the urge to make a face. This, you learn, is chuño, the freeze-dried, rehydrated potato paste created through an ancient process that begins by laying potatoes outside overnight, exposed to the freezing mountain air. In the morning, they're stomped underfoot to expel moisture, then left to dry in the sun. The result is a spongy, long-lasting, ghostly white potato. Both food and ritual material. Both survival and symbol. He scoops a portion of chuño into the bowl, then adds several ladles of stream water. It swirls slowly, catching the firelight and casting dancing shadows across your face. Then comes a pinch of crushed red clay and the crumbled remains of a dried herb. He says its name quietly, like it's a secret or a spell. Then he hands you a stick, flat, wooden, carved with spirals. It's your turn. You stir, cautiously at first. The texture is somewhere between porridge and cold lava. But as it moves, it thickens into something smoother, more intentional. You stir faster. The mixture begins to bubble ever so slightly, releasing soft plops like sleeping thoughts surfacing. Here's where it gets strange. This bowl of sacred mash isn't just a soup or offering, it's a time-keeping device. The priest explains in halting Quechua and meaningful looks that the number of bubbles and the time it takes for them to appear after heat is introduced indicates a specific passage of ceremonial time. 7 silent bubbles, that's 1 prayer cycle. 11, a full meditation loop. Loud bubbles, unacceptable. Those mean bad vibes, or maybe indigestion. The translations are fuzzy. You glance underneath the bowl, no fire. But the base is warm. The trick? Several fire-heated stones, carefully placed earlier when you weren't looking, are now gently warming the clay from beneath, like an ancient slow cooker. But, spiritual, mainstream historical fact. Andean peoples, including the Inca, used an incredible range of non-written systems to track time and events. While they had no clocks or written numerals, they recorded tax, census, and calendar information using quipus, not records of dyed strings, and often relied on environmental signs like stars, animal behavior, and yes, plant conditions. Chuño bowls like this, passed down in oral tradition and ritual, are thought to have functioned like short-term water clocks in some regions. The priest leans over to inspect the mash. You've hit bubble number 3, a hiss, then 4. This, one dances but doesn't burst. Bubble 5 comes and goes without a sound. You hold your breath. 6, a soft croak. The priest gives you side-eye. 7, finally, a perfect round dome of air that rises, holds, and vanishes in total silence. The priest nods. You did it. Quirky tidbit. Some ancient apprentices were reportedly judged by how well they could produce perfectly timed, silent bubble patterns using chuño mash. Those who failed were assigned more earthy tasks, like llama hoof polishing or dung insulation duties. Only the best bubble timers graduated to full potato priesthood. It's like the Harvard of root-based rituals. You set the stick down, hands slightly sore but proud. The priest dips a finger into the mash and tastes it. Another test, apparently. Then he gives a grunt of approval and sets the bowl aside to cool. It will be buried later as part of a harvest ritual, or used in a blessing stew, or fed to the village's most philosophical guinea pig. Interpretations vary. He hands you a carved potato next. Yes, carved, not eaten. It's shaped like a bell. You tap it gently against your palm. It makes no sound. The priest smiles. That's the point. In some ceremonies, these silence bells were used to track time not by ringing, but by not ringing. Set them near a fire and wait. If they remain cool, the ceremony continues. If they warm and let out even a slight sound, well, then someone messed up, or a llama sneezed. Historians still argue whether these practices had a basis in consistent measurement or if they served a more symbolic role. Was the chuño bubble count about timing or about presence? A way to slow the mind, to sync breath and ritual, to feel the minutes melt like mash in warm water. Back at the fire, the music has shifted. Softer flutes now, a gentle tapping of stones. The stars overhead are impossibly bright, unbothered by city lights or modern noise. You sit still, feeling time stretch, pull, and settle again around you, and in your hands, the silence bell potato is still cold. It's sometime after the seventh bubble, and well before the stars begin to blink in synchronized pairs, according to the priest anyway. You've completely lost track of actual hours, minutes, seconds, or whatever units modern society swears by. But that seems to be the point here. Time in the Andes isn't sliced and sold by the quarter hour. It's simmered, softened, and occasionally mashed. The priest rises from the fireside, joints cracking like ceremonial kindling. He stretches his arms with the slow, deliberate rhythm of someone who never rushes, not even to avoid rain. With a quiet grunt, he beckons you with a slight tilt of his chin. You follow him, stomach warm from mash, breath clouding in the crisp air, steps steady on the stone. He leads you beyond the circle of firelight toward a cliffside outcropping shaped like a natural altar. Moonlight spills across it, lending the rock a subtle gleam, as if the surface had been gently brushed with silver. You notice the platform is not just a natural feature. It's been carved, shaped, and respected for generations. The priest places his palms on the surface. You mimic the gesture, fingers splayed against cold stone. You feel the temperature, the age, the faint hum of history vibrating up your forearms. Then your eyes adjust, and you see them. Grooves. They cut through the stone like tiny irrigation canals, shallow and precise. Some are straight, some spiral outward like fingerprints, others fork in elegant V patterns, leading down toward a small hollow basin carved into the lower edge of the rock. The grooves aren't just decoration, they're a map, a system, a network designed for movement. The priest reaches into his woven bag and pulls out what, at first glance, appear to be oddly shaped crackers. But no, these are slivers of potato, thinly sliced, dried, and each a different color and texture. Yellow, violet, dusty brown. Some curled at the edges, others flat and rigid like tiny ceramic tiles. He begins placing them in the grooves, matching, each sliver's shape to a curve or corner of the carved channel. The pieces fit with uncanny precision. This is not a casual activity, it's choreography. You watch for a moment, then kneel beside him to assist. He nods, giving you a sliver, no larger than your thumbnail, dark purple and nearly translucent. You lay it into a groove and feel an odd satisfaction when it locks into place. It's like participating in a puzzle that's both practical and sacred. Once the track is complete, every groove lined with potato slivers, the priest produces a small gourd filled with clear stream water. He raises it skyward, mutters a word that might mean begin or don't mess this up, and pours slowly into the highest groove. The water snakes downward, winding past the slivers, soaking into some, slipping over others, pooling briefly at junctions before trickling onward. You both watch in silence, heads tilted like engineers judging a prototype. Mainstream historical fact, across the ancient Andes, ceremonial platforms often doubled as observation decks, solar clocks, and agricultural planning boards. Carved channels, in stone, sometimes known as pucaras, have been documented, though their exact functions remain debated. Some believe they were symbolic, others claim they functioned as water clocks or ritual flow timers, especially during planting, seasons, or religious festivals. Here, though, something subtler is at play. The water's speed is influenced by the slivers. Some absorb, some resist. The difference in how each potato piece interacts with the liquid changes the flow's overall pace, creating a unique, earthy form of measurement. It's like watching a sand timer if the sand was edible and had opinions about irrigation. Quirky Andean tidbit. In some communities, this method was also a game. Children would carve their own potato pieces and compete to see whose design altered the water's journey most gracefully. It was part science fair, part spiritual training, and part lunch prep, since the losers usually had to cook dinner. The water finally reaches the end of the path, pooling in the basin. The priest retrieves each soggy sliver carefully, placing them into a cloth pouch lined with herbs. He murmurs something about the moon's weight, or perhaps someone named Luna, who was notoriously late. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether this practice had strict timing accuracy or was more symbolic, an embodied act of patience, of being present with flow and change. Some suggest each village had its own slivered dialect, a way of reading and interpreting water flow specific to their potato breeds, elevation, and even microclimate. Others claim this was all metaphor, a spiritual enactment of life's unpredictability, because sometimes water seeps where you least expect. Back in the present, the priest hands you one of the recovered slivers. It's soft now, warm from its journey, and shaped like a tiny paddle. He gestures for you to place it on your tongue. You hesitate, then do so. The taste is unusual. Faintly starchy, of course. But there's a bitterness, a trace of earth and mineral, and an unexpected sweetness at the end. It's like tasting an hour that passed quietly while you weren't looking. He nods as if to say, "Exactly," and then he offers you a final object. A round potato, perfectly smooth, wrapped in dyed wool like a newborn. You cradle it instinctively. It radiates heat, whether from the fire or its own magic, you're unsure. This one, the priest whispers, is a keeper. You're to carry it for the next phase of the night. It will guide you. Potatoes don't just keep time here. They carry it, store it, offer it back to you in edible, tangible form. As you walk back toward the fire, cradling your warm timekeeper, the villagers begin to gather again. Flutes resume their gentle wailing. Laughter, soft and half asleep, bubbles in small clusters. A woman hands you a bowl of steaming stew. Someone else tucks a blanket over your shoulders. The stars blink with exaggerated slowness. And you sit quietly with a potato in your lap and time in your hands. Sleep nearly takes you there by the fire, right where your hands cradle the warm potato like it's a sleepy creature that purrs in pulses of heat. But the priest appears once more, soundless, except for the soft rustle of his woolen cloak in the night breeze. Moonlight wraps around him like silver ribbon. He's holding something new, long, curved, gleaming faintly in the starlight. It's a horn. Not the brass kind you'd find in a marching band, nor the kind that sits on a Viking. Helmet, which for the record were probably horn-free. This one is carved, dark, possibly from a mountain goat, and etched with symbols so worn they look like whispers. He lifts it slowly, and with a glance over his shoulder to make sure you're still awake, he blows a note. The sound is low. Not loud, not showy. It's like the mountains themselves are exhaling after holding their breath for 1,000 years. You rise without thinking, and of course you bring the potato. At this point, it would be rude not to. He leads you through another trail, not far, but winding enough to make your legs remember you've been on sacred starch duty all night. The trail opens into a clearing, ringed by large stones standing, upright like forgotten guardians. Some lean to one side, worn down by centuries of watching the sky. Others are surprisingly sharp-edged, still holding form and function after lifetimes in the cold. Each stone bears a marking, carved lines, sunbursts, and in one case what appears to be a rather smug-looking potato with a crown. You decide not to question that one. Maybe he was important. The priest stops at the largest stone and gestures toward its center. A shallow notch runs through it, narrow and straight, filled with something pale and glossy. Quartz, you realize. When the moonlight hits it, it glows faintly, like the stone is keeping a secret, but only half-heartedly. This, the priest murmurs, is a sun track. But tonight, it watches the moon. Mainstream historical fact. Sites across the Andes, from Cusco to Tiwanaku, feature structures aligned with astronomical events. Solstice markers, equinox lines, and sacred stones were used to predict rainy seasons, harvest windows, and ceremonial days. While most surviving records focus on the sun, oral traditions in remote areas describe similar attention paid to the moon and its cycles, especially for nocturnal rituals and female-centric ceremonies. Here's the Andean twist. They didn't just observe the sky. They brought the earth into the equation. Literally. The priest crouches and begins pulling dried potatoes from his woven pouch. They're not random. Each one is a specific shape, size, and color. Some are flat and round like coins, others knobbier, more poetic. Each is carefully placed at the base of a standing stone, tucked into natural hollows worn by time or carved by intention. He hands you one, blue, slightly wrinkled, with a split down one side that resembles a smile. He nods toward a smaller stone with a circular cup at its foot. You place the potato inside. It fits with the kind of precision that suggests someone planned this centuries ago and trusted you'd show up eventually. The priest raises the horn again, and this time the note is softer, longer. A breeze stirs. A few clouds drift away from the moon's face like curtains parting. And then it happens. A single beam of moonlight threads through the quartz-filled notch of the central stone and lands directly perfectly on your potato. The priest doesn't react like it's magic. To him, it's normal, expected. This is just what happens when time and moon and potato align. You, on the other hand, are blinking in awe, mouth slightly open. You might be drooling just a little. The priest explains, through gestures and short, rhythmic phrases, that each stone marks a point in the lunar cycle. The potatoes at their base, when struck by moonlight at the right moment, begin their own countdown. Left for days or weeks, they'll soften, sprout, or collapse, depending on environmental factors. Priests monitored these changes to tell when a ritual period had passed, or when a new moon cycle was ready to begin. Quirky tidbit. Certain potatoes were believed to sing during these cycles. Not literally, but by developing tiny splits in their skin that hissed softly in wind or heat. These singing spuds were considered prophetic and, once dried, were often kept in ceremonial pouches as wisdom charms. Historians still argue whether these moon potato systems were accurate enough to use for agriculture or whether they served primarily symbolic roles in religious life. Some records suggest the potato's decay rate correlated with rainfall predictions. Others say it was simply a tangible reminder of passing time, organic, visible, and humble. You crouch beside your moonlit tuber. It's not glowing exactly, but it feels special. It's warm from the light, a bit soft around the edges. You wonder what it will look like in 3 days. The priest taps it gently, then scoops it into a small pouch and hands it to you. He calls it Urak Teta, White Father, not because of its color, but because it remembers the light. You don't know what to do with that, so you nod, solemn and sleepy. More beams now. The moon has crested fully into view, and the other standing stones begin to cast their quartz beams downward. Each potato catches the light, turning the ring of stones into a sleepy, sacred potato laser show. You half expect a wise alpaca to descend from the clouds and pronounce your destiny. Instead, the priest smiles, pats your shoulder, and gestures back toward camp. The flute music has resumed, slower now. A lullaby in reed tones. Someone laughs near the fire. A baby coos. A dog snores like it's telling secrets in its sleep. You return to your spot, curl up under your borrowed blanket, and cradle the pouch that now holds your potato. It's still warm, and in that moment, you're not worried about clocks or alarms or what the time might be. You already know. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it happens. You're not entirely sure when the stars faded or when the flute music stopped. All you know is that the sky has turned from indigo to apricot, and there's a soft light falling on your face, filtered through the fluttering edge of a thatched roof. You wake curled like a cinnamon roll, blanket tangled, one arm still cradling the ceremonial potato pouch like a sleepy squirrel guarding its last acorn. The priest is already up, of course. Probably has been for hours. You spot him hunched near a small stream, not praying, not performing a ritual, just peeling a potato with the calm focus of a man who knows 137 ways to serve one root vegetable and is about to demonstrate the 138th. He looks up, catches your eye, and smiles. Not the mysterious kind this time. It's the smile of someone who knows the day will be long, but has no intention of hurrying it. Today, he tells you with a few words and many gestures, you'll visit the carved calendars, the real ones, the ancient stones that track seasons, not just hours. These are the ones used for agriculture, migration, and ceremonial timing, for festivals involving costumes, fermented beverages, and, surprise, potatoes in symbolic outfits. He leads you along a narrow mountain path. Dew glistens on everything. You walk in silence for a while, passing fields where farmers are already at work, knee-deep in soil, chanting to themselves or to the spirits of the crops. You pass a woman painting a small gourd with red dye. A child beside her holds a potato, wrapped in a tiny woolen cape. You try not to stare. Eventually, you arrive at a flat plateau where the earth rises into a large natural amphitheater. At its center stands a stone circle, 12 broad slabs, evenly spaced, each carved with both astronomical markers and peculiar symbols. Some are animals, some are clouds. One appears to be a potato with legs and an attitude. The priest guides you into the center. He explains as best he can that this is not just a calendar, it's a solar alignment ring. On equinox days, the sunrise cuts through one particular pair of stones, casting a beam across the circle to strike a carved spiral at the base of the opposite side. That's when planting begins. That's when the first seeds are sung into the ground. Mainstream historical fact. Across Andean cultures, agricultural calendars were intricately tied to astronomical events. Structures like the Torreon at Machu Picchu and the Pillars of the Sun near Cusco align with solstices and equinoxes. They marked times to plant, harvest, and hold festivals that involved offerings of maize, chicha, corn beer, and yes, our beloved potato. The potato, the priest reminds you, wasn't just food. It was a witness. It was placed in these alignment circles during certain parts of the year to absorb sun wisdom, a sort of solar charging ritual. These potatoes were never eaten. Instead, they were wrapped in cloth, buried with crops, or carried during festivals like wise mascots. Quirky. Tidbit: in some highland regions, farmers still perform sun potato readings. They leave specific varieties on carved ledges overnight during equinoxes, then examine their texture and sprouting behavior the next day to predict the weather or judge the health of the coming growing season. If the potato remains firm and dry, good times ahead. If it turns black or mushy, better postpone that festival. The priest walks you to one of the carved stones, this one marked with a crescent moon and what may or may not be a llama wearing earrings. He taps a small bowl-shaped depression in its surface. This, he says, is where they place the potato on solstice morning. You nod. You've learned not to question the details anymore. He pulls from his satchel a small, dried potato, wrinkled, charcoal gray, and shaped like a squinting eye. He places it in the depression, aligns it carefully with a chisel mark, and gestures for you to watch. The sun is just now cresting the edge of the plateau, and sure enough, when its first full ray stretches across the circle, it lands directly on the potato. The effect isn't dramatic. There are no fireworks. But the potato glows slightly warmer. Steam curls up from the stone, and the priest exhales with the satisfaction of a well-kept promise. Historians still argue whether these stone calendars functioned primarily as timekeeping tools or as communal storytelling devices. ways to ritualize the passage of time in societies that prized collective memory. Some believe these alignments served as reminders of myth cycles, agricultural stages, or even social obligations. You, standing here with the sun on your cheeks and a steaming potato in front of you, suspect it's all of the above. The priest lets the moment settle. Then, with surprising gentleness, he lifts the potato, wraps it in red cloth, and hands it to you. It is now a solstice potato. You are to carry it for the rest of the day. No pressure. You return to the village slowly, the potato wrapped tightly against your chest like a sacred burrito. You pass more farmers now, some singing, some squinting at clouds. The rhythm of the village has picked up, but it still moves. Like honey on a cool morning, steady, sweet, and absolutely unbothered by modern stress. Back at the fire, the priest lays down his cloak, stretches his legs, and begins carving another potato, this one into a small humanoid figure. You sit beside him, potato pouch resting in your lap, and feel a quiet certainty settle in your chest. You don't know what time it is, but here, that just means you're finally doing it right. The village has shifted into its morning rhythm, slow, assured, and scented almost entirely like smoked roots and herbal tea. You stretch your arms above your head, bones cracking softly in the highland air, and the solstice potato shifts in, your pouch like it's settling in for the next part of the story. The priest beckons again, not with urgency, but with the calm expectation that you will, of course, follow. You do. Still wrapped in wool and quiet awe, you fall in step as he leads you through a narrow path between terraced fields, now waking with sunlight. Children scatter feed for chickens. A dog carries a potato in its mouth like a prized toy. You give it a respectful nod. Today, he tells you, it's time to learn about offerings. Not sacrifices, not anything so grim, but gifts. Specifically, how some potatoes weren't destined for dinner, or timing rituals, or even prediction games. They were destined for gods, or ancestors, or occasionally the moon itself. He stops at a circle of stones on the edge of the village. It's low to the ground, about waist height, and filled with ashes, old charcoal, and the unmistakable earthy scent of burned starch. At the center is a shallow pit, blackened, soot-stained, and reverently maintained. This is the offering oven. Mainstream historical fact. In many Andean societies, food offerings were a crucial part of ritual life. Crops, especially potatoes, were burned, buried, or left at shrines during seasonal changes, family ceremonies, or moments of uncertainty, like droughts or the arrival of strangers. Potatoes were often given alongside coca leaves, maize, and chicha, depending on the occasion and the deity or spirit involved. The priest begins sorting through a pile of carefully selected potatoes, none of them normal. One is shaped like a star. Another is long and spiraled. A third looks suspiciously like a bird's head. He explains that each shape carries meaning. Star shapes are for Pachamama, the Earth Mother. Long spirals are sent to the wind gods. Bird potatoes, offerings for safe journeys, especially across high passes or emotional terrain. You are handed your own, a small heart-shaped tuber with a faint purple stripe. This one, he says, is for the moon. You ask if the moon is especially fond of potatoes. He raises an eyebrow. Of course she is. What else would explain her round, glowing, slightly mysterious appearance? The fire is kindled with dried herbs and bits of twisted wood. It smells not smoky, but clean. Sharp with eucalyptus and mountain mint. As it catches, the priest places the offerings one by one into the embers, whispering a phrase with each. You do the same. Awkwardly, but sincerely. The potato hisses slightly as it meets the heat. You feel oddly emotional. You've never incinerated anything with this much respect before. Then he adds something else. Handfuls of colorful petals, cracked corn, and what looks like a doll made from tightly rolled llama wool. The flames rise a little, dancing. The smoke turns from gray to blue. He watches the color carefully. Quirky tidbit. In some remote areas, it was believed that the color of the smoke from a burned potato offering could tell the priest what kind of year was coming. Blue-gray meant balance. Yellowish meant pests. Black smoke. Best not to talk about it unless you were willing to move. Historians still argue about whether these offerings were purely symbolic or carried real agronomic value. Some claim the smoke helped repel insects. Others believe the rituals reinforced communal unity through shared spiritual theater. A few fringe scholars even argue that certain potato strains were bred specifically for how they burned, not just how they tasted. As the final flames begin to die down, the priest scoops a bit of ash into a small pouch and tucks it into his belt. You notice others around the village doing the same, collecting bits of the ritual to spread over fields or keep in their homes as blessing dust. He offers you a pinch. You smear it across the back of your hand as instructed, and it leaves a faint, dark trail that glitters ever so slightly in the sun. You sit for a while by the fire pit, watching as the smoke curls into the sky, slow and sinuous. The breeze carries it toward the mountains, toward the moon, maybe. A woman nearby begins humming a tune, soft, repetitive, the kind that sounds like it was never written down, just passed from one grandmother to another. A few villagers join in, voices weaving together in a tapestry of memory and mash. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the ground beneath you doesn't feel solid. It feels like a heartbeat. Like the earth is breathing beneath you, accepting the offerings, noting the time not in numbers, but in warmth, in smoke, in the scent of roasted roots and burnt petals. Your solstice potato nestles against your side. It is warm again, and you feel, without looking at any clock, that the hour has passed. After the last whisper of smoke vanishes into the mountain air, the priest gives a small, satisfied nod and begins to walk once more. This time down a winding path bordered by low stone walls and tufts of wild mint. You follow, still carrying the solstice potato, which now feels like an old friend tucked in your sash. It jiggles slightly as you walk, as if eager for whatever comes next. He's taking you to learn something more nuanced now. Not the rituals of heat and fire, but of color. Today, you'll learn the potato language of light and pigment, used by ancient priests not just to flavor time, but to understand it. The trail opens onto a broad plateau where several villagers are already at work. They're seated in circles, sorting hundreds, no, thousands, of small potatoes onto colorful woven blankets. The array is breathtaking. Crimson, violet, gold, pale ivory, even deep blue-black like polished obsidian. You didn't know potatoes came in this many colors. Honestly, you're starting to suspect they have secret dye jobs. A young boy offers you one the size of a plum, perfectly purple and warm from the sun. He calls it Ilu Kocha, which translates roughly to lake glow. You tuck it into your pouch. Your solstice potato doesn't seem jealous. The priest begins his explanation. Through gestures, soft phrases, and a rather effective game of potato charades, you begin to understand. Each color means something, and in the time-keeping rituals of the old priesthood, these colors helped mark moments in the day, not by sound, but by sight. Bright yellows, noon, pale pinks, morning prayers, deep purples, twilight rites, black potatoes, ancestral communication. Striped. Varieties, transitional moments, sunrise, sunset, birth, or death. Mainstream historical fact. Andean agricultural societies grew more than 3,000 documented varieties of potato, each adapted to different altitudes, soil types, and ceremonial functions. While modern farming prefers uniformity, traditional Andean cultivation prized diversity, often associating potato types with myths, time cycles, or elements like fire and water. As the priest sorts, He sets aside specific colored tubers in a circular pattern on the woven mat. The sequence he indicates represents a full day, from pre-dawn rituals to night songs. These potatoes, dried and preserved, would be used as visual clocks. A priest didn't look at a sundial. He looked at a pattern of colors, checking their softness, aroma, and hue to read the hour. You try your hand at it. The priest hands you a bundle of mixed tubers and points to the empty woven square. You hesitate, then begin placing them in a spiral. Golden yellow first, then creamy white, dusty pink, deep maroon, then fading into blue and black. You finish the spiral and sit back. He studies it, then adjusts two of your placements, not judging, just refining. He nods. You've built a color clock, quirky tidbit. In some communities, color-based timekeeping extended to clothing. Priests would wear tunics with stripes of dyed wool matching the color of the current ritual hour. Some wore time belts made from tiny dried potatoes strung in a sequence like beads, each corresponding to a prayer or task. One legendary priest supposedly had a sash with over 70 miniature potato charms and never once repeated a morning chant. Historians still argue whether these color systems were standardized or entirely regional. Some believe the meanings of each color were passed down orally and varied from village to village. What was dawn pink in one valley might be dusk crimson in another. Others suggest a loose, intuitive grammar where priests trained to feel the meaning more than memorize it. The villagers begin singing again, not loudly but rhythmically, in time with their sorting. It sounds like a lullaby for the land, or maybe for the potatoes themselves. The sky is a flawless blue. The wind picks up strands of song and scatters them across the field like flower petals. You close your eyes for a moment. The sun rests against your skin like a warm hand. You feel the colors of the day unfold even without seeing them, like tasting them, breathing them. When you open your eyes, the priest is holding up one last potato. It's oddly speckled, half red, half white, divided, almost perfectly down the middle. He says its name, Wasipuka, House of Blood. He sets it at the center of the mat. This potato marks the moment between day and night, the transition hour when most rituals begin or end. It's not the most beautiful potato, but it's the most important, like the second hand on an invisible clock. It divides time. You sit back, watching the spirals of color around you. Potatoes as time, potatoes as language, potatoes as memory. The priest gathers the sacred arrangement and begins placing them in small clay bowls lined with ash and dried flowers. These will be buried later under ceremonial stones, their colors absorbed into the soil like old stories. You rise, pouch heavier now with new tubers and even newer meanings, and as the sun begins its slow tilt toward afternoon, you find yourself measuring time not in minutes, but in maroon, gold, and the warm, ever-present hum of potatoes. The afternoon light turns golden and buttery, sliding down the mountains like someone spilled warm soup over the peaks. The priest stretches his arms with a long sigh, then gestures for you to follow once again. But this time, he adds a theatrical flair to his step, something between a shuffle and a dance. And you have the sudden, unsettling suspicion that you're about to be tested. He leads you to a small, circular plaza on the edge of the village. At the center is a pit, not deep, just wide enough to hold a clay bowl, a pile of firewood, and a suspiciously gleaming pile of small, identical potatoes stacked like cannonballs. A group of villagers is already gathered, seated on the low walls, murmuring and chewing coca leaves. In anticipation, the priest turns and grins. You've reached the potato boil test. He picks up a potato, small, round, golden, and sets it in your palm. It's cool, firm, and seems to be judging you silently. Another priest, older and even more mysterious, if that's possible, approaches with a large gourd filled with spring water and pours it carefully into a clay cauldron. The rules are simple. You must boil your assigned potato until it splits, but not too early, not too late. The moment of rupture must align with the priest's silent time count, which is measured not by clocks, but by the rate of dripping water from a small hanging pouch nearby. No pressure. It's just the ancient Andean equivalent of a practical, final exam, where failure may not bring shame, but might earn you a nickname involving limp vegetables. You kneel beside the fire, feeling every villager's eyes on your hands. The priest hands you a bundle of dried twigs and a firestone. Time to start your own flame. Mainstream historical fact. The Inca and other highland peoples used a wide range of low-tech time indicators, especially for everyday tasks like cooking, dyeing cloth, or ceremonial sequences. Because boiling points change with altitude, mountain communities developed a precise awareness of heat and moisture, especially in relation to their ubiquitous tubers. You strike the flint. Once, twice, sparks fly. A third time, and the twigs catch. The fire builds slowly, steadily, and your cauldron begins to simmer. The priest places the potato in the center of the bubbling water with gentle reverence. Now, it's just you, the heat, the drip of water from the pouch, and the smug, simmering spud staring up at you. The first few minutes are easy. The potato bobs. You watch, you breathe. But soon, the water pouch rhythm becomes hypnotic. Drip, drip, drip. You begin to doubt. Is this taking too long? Is it already split? Is it laughing at you? You lean closer, a little too close. Steam fogs your eyebrows, and then, with a soft pop, like a soap bubble giving up, your potato splits neatly down the center, not too early, not too late. The priest glances at the water pouch, then at you. He nods. You've passed. Quirky tidbit. In some communities, apprentices who failed the boil test 3 times were reassigned to more passive rituals, like carrying prayer stones or serving chicha at moonlit dances. Those who passed, however, were given special status, and often their own ceremonial potato, carved with their personal glyph and boiled only once a year. The villagers murmur approval. Someone offers you a cup of thick, warm drink, part soup, part tea, part fermented mystery. You sip. It tastes like smoky corn and good decisions. The priest presents your test potato, now split, slightly steaming and resting on a piece of dyed wool. He places it in your palm, wraps your fingers around it, and whispers a phrase that roughly translates to, "You now carry the hour within you." You rise, still slightly unsure if this was a test or a rite or a really elaborate cooking class. But everyone is smiling. Someone starts playing a panpipe. The children begin spinning in small circles. A dog barks once, then sits politely on a stone like it's seen this all before. Historians still argue whether tests like these were truly used to evaluate ritual precision or whether they served as storytelling tools, ways to bring younger generations into the rhythm of the village without using written language or formal schooling. Either way, the message was clear. Mastery over time begins with attention. You sit again by the fire as the coals cool. Your potato, now soft and halved, rests beside you. You don't eat it. That would feel rude. Instead, you wrap it in cloth and place it in your pouch, next to the solstice tuber and the blue-purple one from the moon ceremony. You've become a walking calendar, a breathing clock, a gently roasted, slightly mystified timekeeper, and as the sun begins to sink toward the western cliffs, you find yourself smiling, not because you passed the test, but because you finally stopped asking what time it was and started feeling it instead. The sun begins its slow descent behind the western cliffs, throwing long, lazy shadows across the fields. Everything turns gold, then amber, then that odd, almost magical blue-gray that always seems to arrive just before the first torch is lit. And tonight is no ordinary evening. The priest approaches, his robe freshly dusted, his hair smoothed into something resembling ceremonial neatness. He holds out a carved mask, made of woven reeds, painted with faded dyes, and shaped like a potato, with an exaggerated expression of wide-eyed wonder. He hands it to you with a short bow. Welcome to the Festival of the Moon-Eyed Potatoes. You're not entirely sure what this means yet, but judging by the bustle in the village, the flickering torches being lit, and the low hum of panpipes warming up like sleepy cicadas, it's kind of a big deal. Mainstream historical fact. Many Andean communities celebrated lunar cycles with festivals that included storytelling, masks, food offerings, and music. These weren't just excuses to dance. They marked shifts in the agricultural calendar, honored deities tied to fertility and weather, and served as a social glue binding the community together. Tonight's festival celebrates not just the moon, but potatoes that have been seen by the moonlight, those that received the lunar beam through quartz stone or through exposure during specific ceremonial nights. These potatoes, believed to absorb lunar wisdom, are decorated, sung to, and, depending on their behavior, even consulted. The priest leads you to the main plaza. A bonfire has been kindled at its heart, casting flickering light over an ever-growing crowd. Every villager carries something: a mask, a drum, a woven pouch filled with offerings, or, in several cases, an actual potato with human-like features carved into it. One woman carries a tiny potato with goat horns. Another's is wearing a miniature cape. You're handed a flute. You've never played a flute. The priest shrugs. No pressure. He blows a single note, thin, wobbly, and the circle begins. Drums thump. Flutes wail. And the dancing begins. Not wild or chaotic, but slow, deliberate, as if each step is tracing a line only the stars can see. You fall into rhythm. Feet move without thinking. The music surrounds you like warm air. The bonfire crackles in time with the drums, and the night becomes less about performance and more about presence. Quirky tidbit. During these moon festivals, it was believed that laughter made the potatoes remember better. Villagers would tell ridiculous stories about famous tubers, one who danced into the fire and came out as a god, another who whispered agricultural advice during a thunderstorm. Children howled, elders smirked, and somewhere in the smoke and rhythm, memory became magic. The priest leads a chant, not words you understand, but you follow the sound, the tone, the vibration. It moves through you like heartbeat, like breath, like time itself, realigning just slightly. Historians still argue about whether these moon potato ceremonies served an astronomical purpose, or whether they were simply the joyous release of weeks of labor. Either way, their legacy lives on, not just in whispered stories, but in the genetic memory of every potato now growing in distant soil. Your mask grows warm on your face. Your feet ache slightly from the rhythm. You've never danced in a festival where every step felt like part of a calendar. But here, each twirl is a season, each clap a reminder that time is not something to fear, but something to be shared. At the festival's height, a child carries out the potato oracle, a large, lumpy tuber with 3 eyes and a piece of red string tied around its middle. The village elder lifts it high. The music hushes. A question is asked. In your case, whispered by the priest in your ear, what will you carry forward when the moon is gone? You don't answer aloud. You don't have to. The potato oracle is lowered into a ceremonial bowl. The string is burned. The eyes are anointed with herbs. The festival continues. As the night deepens, the villagers begin drifting back to their homes. Laughter fades. Torches are snuffed one by one. But your mind hums with the weight of a new kind of time, measured in dance steps, smoke trails, and the glow of something as humble as a potato believed to have seen the moon. You return to your sleeping mat with the mask still in your hands. You place it gently beside your pouch of ritual spuds, now joined by a tiny potato gifted by one of the children. A thank you for dancing like a very tall beetle. You smile. You've become part of the rhythm now. Of steps, of stories, of spuds. And the moon, wide-eyed above, says nothing, but watches everything. Morning doesn't so much arrive as it stretches its limbs slowly, yawns over the mountain peaks, and spills pale light into the valley like someone forgot to turn off the celestial faucet. You wake groggily, surrounded by the familiar scent of ash, wildflowers, and just the faintest trace of roasted root vegetable. Today, your priest guide is waiting near the edge of the village, already chewing something thoughtfully, probably coca leaves, possibly wisdom. He gestures for you to join him on a small hike. You obey, because by now your feet know the way before your brain does. As you walk, he explains, in the slow poetic shorthand you've come to love, that there was a time, long before the conquistadors arrived, when potatoes weren't just ceremonial. They were strategic. Today, you'll learn how tubers once served not just the fields and the fires, but the front lines. Welcome to the wartime world of spud-based strategy. You crest a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. The terrain is harsh, even by Andean standards. Rocky outcrops, sudden drops, and winding paths barely wider than a potato slice. It's the perfect place for an ambush or a deeply uncomfortable picnic. Mainstream historical fact: during periods of regional conflict in the Andes, particularly in the pre-Inca and Inca periods, armies relied heavily on local terrain knowledge and logistical creativity. While records often highlight slingshots, bolas, and guerrilla tactics, less is written about food-based logistics, but evidence shows potatoes were central to campaigns, not just as rations, but as part of a larger timing and mobility system. The priest crouches beside a small pile of stones and uncovers a hidden cache. Inside, dried chuño potatoes, hard as rocks, lightweight, nutritious. Essentially the granola bar of the ancient Andes. He holds one up like it's a relic, which, to be fair, it probably is. These potatoes, he explains, were carried by messengers, scouts, and soldiers. But beyond sustenance, they also helped measure timing. How? Because chuño, when rehydrated in stream water, expands at a predictable rate. Warriors on the move would leave soaked chuño at waypoints, hidden in moss, tucked under rocks. Another party would arrive, examine its softness, and know exactly how long ago the first group had passed. Quirky tidbit. There are tales of rival tribes attempting to tamper with chuño signals, over-soaking them to confuse scouts, or even replacing them with fresh ones to mislead. This led to the rise of the potato checkers, trusted specialists whose only job was to sniff, squish, and evaluate the integrity of tuber intelligence. You try it. The priest hands you a dried chuño and a small gourd of water. You drop it in, wait 5 minutes, then test its firmness with your fingers. It's still stiff. Translation: you've arrived early. The next unit? Probably half an hour behind. Historians still argue about how widespread this practice was. Some believe it was used only in certain highland valleys, where potato knowledge ran deep and trust in more visible signals, like cairns or smoke, was minimal. Others think it may have functioned more as a local adaptation. In places where time couldn't be watched, it had to be felt. You continue hiking until you reach a flat outcropping. Here, the priest points out faint markings in the rock, carved lines, dots, and notches in spirals. He lays out a series of small stones, each one paired with a dried potato slice. He mimes a chase. One group flees, another follows. The position of the potatoes tells the pursuers how far ahead the others are. It's like the world's most nutritious strategy map. He grins and hands you a slingshot. You raise an eyebrow. He gestures at a line of clay targets nearby, each painted, with symbols. One has a sun, another a jaguar, and one, hilariously, is just a really annoyed-looking potato. You aim, you fire, you miss, wildly. He chuckles and takes his turn. His shot hits the sun square in the center. Then, with quiet ceremony, he places a purple potato slice on the cracked edge of the shattered clay, marking the time of strike. Back in the day, that would have meant something, a timing mark to coordinate with other actions, or to signal readiness for an ambush. Maybe a way to time prayers before battle. Maybe just a way to remember, a potato timestamp. As you rest on a flat stone, sipping mountain water and nibbling dried maize, the priest recounts an old legend of a warrior who carried a pouch of singing potatoes into battle. Tubers said to hum at certain times of day. He was never caught. His timing was always perfect. Was it magic? Was it mash? Historians shrug. The villagers just nod and say, "Sounds about right." You walk back as the light shifts again, softening, from sharp noon to mellow afternoon. You carry a pouch of chuño now, firm and resilient, a little like you. And as the village comes back into view, you glance down at the toughest little potato in your hand and whisper, "Right on time." You return to the village under the soft glow of early twilight, expecting maybe a quiet bowl of stew, a ceremonial potato polish, or just a long nap under your poncho. But your priest guide has other plans. He appears beside you once more, eyes sparkling in that unsettlingly serene way of his. He doesn't say anything, just lifts his chin and walks toward the forested edge of the village, motioning for you to follow. You hesitate only briefly. Your feet by now are fluent in Andean obedience. The path winds beneath trees draped in moss like nature's version of velvet curtains. The air changes, cooler, damper, tinged with something vaguely herbal and mildly alarming. You're handed a gourd. It's warm. Steam curls from the rim. You peer inside. The liquid is dark, slightly thick, and smells like someone tried to make a soup out of memories and a questionable spice rack. The priest nods, silently urging you to drink. He doesn't seem worried. In fact, he seems rather delighted. You take a sip, earthy, bitter, peppery on the back of your tongue, and underneath it all, a strange mineral tang, as if someone steeped a potato in starlight and regret. The priest smiles faintly, then sits cross-legged on a woven mat beneath a large, low-hanging tree. Lanterns have been strung above, carved gourds with tiny holes, glowing from within like constellations trapped in fruit. The scene feels theatrical, but also deeply grounded. A sacred stage. You join him on the mat. He begins to hum, soft, repetitive, not quite melodic, but insistent. The kind of tune that seems simple until you realize it has no beginning or end. You glance around. There are others nearby, seated in silence, some with eyes closed, others gently swaying. Each has a gourd. Each holds a potato in their lap. Yes, this is real. Tonight, the priest explains, or gestures meaningfully enough for you to infer, is a lunar threshold. A liminal evening when the moon hangs precisely between two sacred agricultural phases. Nights like this are rare, and on nights like this, certain potatoes, wild ones, never domesticated, are brought out not to eat, but to see. Mainstream historical fact, while most cultivated Andean potatoes are safe and delicious, some wild, relatives contain glycoalkaloids and other compounds that, in concentrated doses, can cause mild hallucinations, numbness, or altered perception. These were not commonly consumed, but there's evidence they were included in controlled ritual contexts, particularly in highland religious practices focused on dreams, vision, and divination. You finish the tea. The priest passes you a potato. It's knobby, oddly shaped, with a faint spiral pattern across its skin. You cradle it as instructed, both hands wrapped around its warmth. At first, nothing happens. Then, slowly, the world begins to soften. Not in a dizzy way. You don't feel drunk, just porous. The boundary between what's inside your head and what's in the world seems to loosen. The potato grows warmer. You look down, and for a moment, swear you see it pulsing gently, light swelling beneath the skin like a heartbeat. You blink. It's normal again? Or is it? You can't tell anymore. The priest hums louder now, joined by another voice, then another. The whole group begins to chant. Not words, not quite. Just sound. Echoes. A rising vibration that fills the clearing like fog. You close your eyes, and that's when the dream begins. You're standing in a field of giant potatoes, taller than trees, each glowing faintly with a different hue: gold, silver, blue. They whisper, not in words, but in feelings. One tells you a joke, though you don't understand it. Another sings a lullaby. A third shows you a memory you've never had, planting a field with hands that aren't yours, beside. A child who calls you grandfather. You walk among them, shoes sinking into rich black soil. You feel no fear, only timelessness. The priest's voice cuts gently through the vision. You open your eyes, you're back, still seated. The potato is still in your hands, warm, firm, silent. But something has shifted. Quirky tidbit. In some oral traditions, potatoes were believed to carry ancestral knowledge, not symbolically, but literally. A certain wild potato, grown on a hill above a tomb, was thought to absorb wisdom through the roots. Elders said that holding such a potato at the right time, under the right phase of the moon, would bring visions of forgotten lineages or offer guidance in dreams. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphor, medicine, or mysticism. Some dismiss the rituals as folklore. Others point to consistent practices across regions as evidence of deeply rooted spiritual neuroscience, a cultural technology for collective memory. Either way, you now understand why they called it the seeing root. The priest leans forward and taps your chest lightly. Yake, he whispers. Knowledge. Or maybe remembrance. You sit in silence for a while. The others begin to stir. Someone laughs softly, another begins to sing. The stars overhead feel closer now, like they've drifted down to watch more, intently. You walk slowly back toward the village, gourd now empty, potatoes still warm in your pouch. The lanterns flicker behind you, the chants fade, but something lingers inside your chest, a sense that you've not just seen time, but briefly stepped outside of it. You return to your sleeping mat, wrap yourself tightly, and place the potato beside your head like a talisman. Not because it's magic, but because it listened. You exhale. Sleep comes like a tide, and somewhere in the woods behind you, a single gourd lantern continues to glow. You wake slowly, with the peculiar sensation that your dreams were having a lively conversation without you. It lingers, a half-formed idea just out of reach, hovering behind your eyelids like a puff of fog that won't commit to raining. Your hand brushes against the sleeping potato beside you, and it's still warm. Not warm from the sun. Warm like it remembers something. Today, the village is different. Still, yes, but not lazy. More like reverent. Quiet in a purposeful way. Even the dogs bark more softly, as though they know better than to shatter whatever. Ceremony lies ahead. The priest meets you near the fire, already wrapped in a darker cloak than usual, his head bowed slightly. He doesn't speak. He just gestures. Downward. You follow him through a path that snakes beneath a thick canopy of vines and reed curtains, until it opens to a small earthen doorway carved into the side of a hill. At first, it looks like a storage cellar. But then, you see the intricate symbols around the frame, spirals, stars, and of course, potatoes. Always potatoes. He leads you inside. The descent is short but immediate. The light disappears quickly, replaced by the soft, flickering glow of small oil lamps lining the walls. The scent hits you all at once. Dry earth, aged smoke, and something sweet. Not sweet like sugar. Sweet like memory. This, the priest tells you with a gesture and a whisper, is the chamber of stillness, a place where potatoes are no longer for eating or measuring time for the living, but for keeping time for the dead. Mainstream historical fact. Archaeological excavations in the Andes have revealed numerous burial sites where potatoes were found interred alongside human remains. These were often not random food rations for the afterlife, but were carefully selected, sometimes painted, sometimes wrapped in cloth or paired with symbolic items like beads, coca leaves, or miniature figurines. In many traditions, they represented a kind of clock that accompanied the spirit on its slow passage through the world beyond. The chamber is cool and dry. Along the walls are shelves carved into the stone, and on these shelves are dozens, perhaps hundreds, of dried potatoes. Most are wrapped in faded cloths, embroidered with symbols or knots. Others are bare, but miraculously intact. A few seem impossibly preserved, with their shapes unblemished, despite decades, possibly centuries, of rest. The priest walks you to one shelf and lifts a small bundle. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a potato the size of your palm. Deep brown, spiraled, faintly like a seashell, its skin slightly glossy. He places it in your hands, and it feels oddly light, but dense with meaning. He murmurs something you don't quite catch, and then holds up a finger. 1 year. This potato, he explains, has been down here for a year, keeping time for a soul in transition. Not gone. Not here. Suspended. Resting in the long shadow between. You look around again. Each shelf has markings above it. Lines and notches, circles with dots inside them. Glyphs that resemble calendars or constellations. Some are faded. Others, freshly carved. You begin to understand these are timelines. Silent ones, quirky tidbit. In certain Andean regions, potatoes were used as spirit clocks. Families of the deceased would return to their loved one's burial site annually to inspect the state of the potato. If it had shriveled too quickly, it meant the soul was troubled. If it remained firm, it meant peace. If it sprouted, it meant the spirit had returned to visit. In extremely rare cases, if the potato appeared larger than before, it was considered a miracle. The ancestor had become a guide. You're shown to a stone niche near the back. At its center is a small shrine, a low altar with 4 potatoes, placed precisely around a quartz crystal. Each potato is painted, one red, one blue, one black, one white. These, the priest tells you, represent the 4 seasons of the soul. Not spring, summer, autumn, winter, but awakening, remembering, releasing, and returning. He adds a 5th potato, plain and unpainted, to the center of the cross. That one, he says, is for you. You're not dead, of course, but everyone is transitioning. Everyone is keeping time. He guides your hand to rest over it. You hold it in silence as one of the small oil lamps flickers beside you. Historians still debate whether these potato-keeping practices were literal beliefs in post-life timing or symbolic acts of remembrance. Some claim it was part of a greater cosmology where time was not linear but cyclical, spiraling like the sprout of a growing tuber. Others believe it was simply a way to keep loved ones close, measured in seasons instead of tears. But as you sit in the chamber surrounded by these earthy sacred timers, it doesn't feel metaphorical at all. You can almost hear the ticking, not as sound, but as feeling. Tiny movements of time, unfolding slowly in the dark. You return the potato to the altar gently. The priest presses a small pouch into your hand, a single dried potato wrapped in red thread. It's a gift, he says with a bow, to carry time forward for someone who has none left. You climb the steps back into the daylight. The sun feels new, not brighter, just different, like it's been waiting. And you, walking back into the village, feel older. Not in a heavy way, just quietly aware that every step is counted somewhere, even now, even in silence, by something soft, patient, and brown. The sun sits low in the sky again, casting long golden fingers across the terraces. A gentle breeze whispers through the thatched roofs and rattles drying herbs like wind chimes in a forgotten language. You walk slowly now, your pace no longer dictated by urgency, but by rhythm, one you've come to feel in your chest, and occasionally in your satchel full of ancient potatoes. The priest waits for you near a path of carefully placed stones leading upward, toward the cliffs. He doesn't explain. He just gestures, palms up, eyes soft. You follow. The climb is gentle at first, then more demanding as the air thins and the path narrows. The view widens behind you. Patchwork fields, low houses, and the shimmer of distant fires. And then, just as your legs start questioning your life decisions, you reach a platform. Stone, silent, ancient. Before you rise is a wall, rectangular blocks fitted so precisely you couldn't slip a sheet of paper between them. This is no ordinary architecture. This is Machu Picchu's forgotten cousin, a ceremonial site used only for solstice observances and shadow work. It feels like a stage, a portal, and a clock all at once. The priest walks to one corner and gently places a potato on a small carved ledge. The ledge itself isn't random. It sits at the base of a pillar, whose top edge casts a perfect shadow on the solstice. You watch as the sun begins its descent behind a ridge. Slowly, the shadow of the pillar stretches across the platform, creeping like ink on parchment. And then, just as it kisses the potato, the priest nods. This, he explains, is one of the most sacred measurements, the angle of light against life. Mainstream historical fact. Throughout the Andes, especially in Incan architecture, solstice. Markers and shadow-casting stones played key roles in ritual calendars. Sites like Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun, functioned as solar observatories, linking the heavens to agricultural cycles. Some of these stones were so revered that Spanish conquistadors tried to destroy them, believing they held magical control over time. The potato on the ledge remains perfectly still, but the light changes its color, turning its skin from beige to gold to deep rose, then back to gray. The priest watches intently. The color change isn't just aesthetic, it's diagnostic. He picks it up, smells it, squeezes it gently. You're handed your own potato, smaller, oblong, faintly striped, and instructed to place it at another stone notch. You do. It sits, almost smugly, as the light bends around it like liquid glass. You crouch, watching its color shift. Here's where it gets even stranger. As the shadow lengthens, it hits a second stone, a flat slab embedded with tiny, almost invisible grooves. One by one, those grooves catch the light from your potato's reflection. It glints like Morse code. The priest begins to hum a low note in response, not a chant, a tone. This isn't just measurement. It's music, quirky tidbit, uncertain. Andean myths, it's said that when potatoes are in tune with the sun, they can sing, not in sound, but in vibration. Priests would lay them in specific places to catch both shadow and wind, and the resulting airflows were believed to carry divine messages. Some even claimed to hear whispers in the rustling of sprouting leaves. Historians still argue about whether these songs were acoustic phenomena or poetic metaphors. But a few researchers have recreated these light-shadow interactions and noted that the heat variations between sunlit and shaded potato skins can cause faint pops, similar to whispers or sighs. The priest leans forward and plucks your potato from its spot. He holds it aloft, turning it slowly. Then he smiles. One of those rare, full-body smiles that includes his eyebrows, and places it into a special pouch tied around his waist. You passed again. You sit together for a while, watching the sun slide lower, the stone shadows lengthening. No one speaks. The air is crisp but soft. A hawk circles overhead. Far below, a flute plays somewhere in the village. You feel it more than hear it. And then he shows you the final piece, a carved basin on the platform's far edge, where water has been poured earlier. The surface is still, reflective. You kneel beside it and see not just yourself, but the sky behind you and, faintly, the shimmering shadow of the potato that had been resting on the ledge. In this moment, you understand. This is not a device for measuring time. It's a device for remembering that you are in time, that the potato, like you, belongs not to hours or days, but to the slow bending of light, the cool curve of stone, the quiet hush of everything that continues even when you aren't watching. You stand. The priest gives you a new potato, smaller, smooth, heavy for its size. This one, he says in a whisper, doesn't measure time. You blink. It holds it. You nod, because somehow that makes perfect sense. Night has returned to the village, slipping over the peaks like a black alpaca with starlight on its back. You descend from the solstice platform slowly, potato in hand, pouch full of stories. The world below seems quieter now. Or maybe you are. As you near the central plaza, something feels off. People are gathered in tight knots, whispering, gesturing animatedly. The fire in the center burns lower than usual, and the children, normally chasing each other with decorative gourds or tiny drums, are clustered near their parents, wide-eyed. The priest meets you at the edge of the crowd. He's not smiling. With careful hands, he takes your pouch and peeks inside. He frowns, then he mutters a word you've never heard before. Sharp, short, serious. The ceremonial mash has been stolen. Yes, stolen. Not just any mash. The one prepared during last week's new moon. A sacred blend of chuño, red clay, herb, ash, and water from the upper spring. This mash wasn't for eating. It was a timing relic, a literal timestamp in sacred potato paste, meant to track the upcoming harvest cycle. It had been drying in a protected bowl behind the offering hut. Now, it's gone, and suspicions point toward a rival village. A small clan 3 valleys over with a long-standing envy of this one's harvest celebrations. Not warlike, but cheeky, historically prone to ceremonial mischief. Once, they reportedly replaced every ritual flute reed with slivers of spicy root. The music? Unbearable. Tonight, however, the offense is serious. The mash must be recovered, not just for ritual purity, but because the next moon-aligned ceremony cannot begin without it. Timing matters. And potatoes, especially mashed ones, do not wait forever. You are offered the role of runner. That's right. You, mainstream historical fact. During the height of the Inca Empire, specialized messengers called chasquis would run across vast networks of mountain roads to deliver messages, often by quipu or by memory. These runners were trained from youth, known for incredible endurance, and their routes included relay stations with supplies, food, and ceremonial markers. You are not a trained chasqui, but you are deeply motivated by both honor and potato justice. The priest outfits you with a travel pouch, a reed whistle for signaling, and a dried timing potato. This one is special. It's been partially baked and sealed in beeswax. You are to bite it gently every hour. When it goes from chewy to soft, you'll know you've gone too far. You set out at a jog. The stars spin overhead. The path is uneven. A goat nearly takes you out. You recover. Half an hour in, you reach a small clearing. There's a makeshift campfire. A few men are seated around it, chuckling. One is stirring something. It smells very familiar. You hide. Behind a rock, then squint. There it is, the bowl, the ceremonial bowl, still etched with sun and moon symbols. Inside, the unmistakable grayish mass of sacred mash, still intact, still warm. You step forward softly, reed whistle in hand. They spot you. You blow the whistle. It sounds less heroic than expected. More like a panicked bird sneeze, a tense moment. Then, laughter. Turns out they didn't steal it maliciously. One of them was visiting the village, misunderstood its purpose, and thought it was leftover festival dip. They intended to return it, but forgot, and got hungry. Quirky tidbit. In some regions, sacred foods were so commonly mistaken for snacks that villagers started using elaborate labeling systems. Small colored stones placed next to bowls, or gourd lids carved with frowning faces. The universal message: this is not lunch, it's time. You gently retrieve the bowl. It's mostly untouched, a ceremonial nibble or two, perhaps. The group offers you a piece of roasted corn in apology. You accept. It's very good. Historians might debate whether incidents like this were common, whether rival villages often poked fun through food, or if this was the ancient Andean version of light diplomatic trolling. Either way, the priests always managed to restore order. You return, victorious, just before midnight. The village welcomes you with low cheers. No one yells. That would be rude. But you are presented with a small garland of potato blossoms, which someone drapes over your shoulders like you just won a marathon made of mash and diplomacy. The priest examines the bowl, sniffs, nods. The ceremony may continue. The mash is placed back on the fire's edge, recharged with sacred herbs, and stirred exactly 7 times. You sit down, exhausted, legs trembling, heart still racing. The priest leans over and whispers, "You passed another test." You whisper back, "No more running." And the potato in your pouch shifts slightly as if agreeing. You wake to the sound of rustling straw, quiet footsteps, and the distinct squeak of something small, curious, and possibly divine. The sun is just beginning to crest the eastern cliffs, painting the sky with pale pinks and sleepy golds. You sit up slowly, blinking against the morning light, and notice the priest already waiting for you. Again. This time, he has a grin that borders on mischief. Without a word, he gestures for you to follow. You rise, stretch the stiffness from your legs, and walk alongside him through the waking village. People move with familiar ease, sweeping courtyards, grinding maize, adjusting bundles of herbs on their shoulders. But today's lesson is not in shadows or mash or ancient stone. Today, he tells you, is for the backups. Because even in a society where time is measured by tubers blessed under moonlight and boiled to precise ceremonial bursting, sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. Sometimes a priest misplaces a sprouting marker. And sometimes, though no one will admit it, a sacred potato gets accidentally turned into lunch, and so they turn to guinea pigs. Yes. The ultimate contingency plan in the Andean timekeeping world is a small, skittish, adorably rotund creature known locally as CUY. You are led to a low stone enclosure just past the gardens, covered by a woven net and shaded by large banana leaves. Inside, at least a dozen guinea pigs dart between little huts made of clay, hay, and repurposed gourd halves. Some of them have tiny ribbons tied around their middles, red, yellow, blue. One even has what appears to be a feathered headdress. You stare. It stares back. The priest introduces you with an open palm. The guinea pigs do not bow, but one does yawn dramatically. That feels like a sign. He explains, when all else fails, when the clouds cover the sun and the sacred mash goes moldy or the potatoes dry too quickly, these creatures serve as the fallback clocks. Mainstream historical fact. In many Andean cultures, guinea pigs were far more than food. They were used in healing rituals, spiritual consultations, and even as sacrificial offerings. Their behavior, when released, how they moved, what they avoided, was sometimes interpreted as omens, or messages from the spirit world. This extended, in more practical terms, to certain ceremonial tasks, including tracking small intervals of time. The priest hands you a bundle of leaves, fresh and aromatic. Your task, he explains, is simple. You will lay a trail from one side of the enclosure to the other and watch. The time it takes for the first guinea pig to follow the path, pause, or cross a ceremonial line will tell you what the potatoes cannot. You crouch. Lay the leaves in a neat line. A small stone marks the start. Another marks the end. You are also given a tiny dried chuño potato, your baseline clock. It's partially rehydrated, and you're told to squeeze it every few minutes. When it becomes soft, you'll know the standard unit of time has passed. You sprinkle the leaves, you release the guinea pigs. The first one bolts, wrong direction, straight into a wall, spins, runs again. The priest frowns. That one, he says, is anxious time, not usable. The second guinea pig with a yellow ribbon sniffs the line of herbs, pauses, squeaks once, and trots along it with what can only be described as noble purpose. It reaches the second stone, stops, sits, waits. The priest marks something in the dirt with his finger. That was good time. You blink. Good time? He nods. Kai don't lie. Quirky tidbit. In some highland villages, guinea pigs were assigned names based on their performance in timekeeping tasks. One famous Kui named Sumak Koya, a beautiful elder, was believed to sense eclipses in advance. Another, named Tikre, Loop, allegedly marked ritual chants by circling a cooking pot exactly 7 times every dawn during planting season. No one knew why, but no one questioned it. You observe the others. One sits motionless for 10 minutes. Another climbs on top of a stone and squeals loudly before diving into the leaf pile. The priest laughs at that. Too early, he says. Historians still argue whether this guinea pig timekeeping was an isolated practice or more widespread. Some believe it was ritual play, an expression of belief wrapped in harmless absurdity. Others suggest that in the absence of mechanical clocks, watching animals offered a meditative way to connect time with nature's unpredictable rhythms. You begin to see the appeal. There's no anxiety in watching guinea pigs, no ticking, no alarms, just rustling, tiny decisions, and the possibility that someone small might tell you when to begin. One particularly portly guinea pig with a blue ribbon walks the full path 3 times in perfect silence and then sits on your chuño, potato. You check it. It's soft now. The priest beams. This, he says, is the hour. You gather the animals, gently coaxing them back into their little shelters. One tries to eat your ribbon. You let him. He's earned it. As the ritual concludes, the priest gives you a ceremonial token, a small carved guinea pig made of bone with a tiny potato etched into its belly. It is, he says, your official emblem of patience and backup wisdom. You carry it back to your mat, a little lighter now, because sometimes time isn't measured by boiling, burning, or chanting. Sometimes it's told to you by whiskers and tiny feet and the softest squeak. You're up before the sun today, not by choice, but because the priest gently kicked your foot and whispered something that sounded like emergency. That'll get your blood going, even before breakfast. Wrapped in your poncho, eyes still. Crusted with sleep, you're led through the cool pre-dawn haze to the village granary. And there, sitting solemnly at a low bench, are 3 elders. One is sharpening a ceremonial spoon. Another is sorting small, dusty sacks. The third is staring intensely at an empty basket. Something's not right. The priest explains. The annual potato audit is behind schedule. Yes, the audit. Turns out once a year, every sacred tuber in storage must be counted, weighed, examined, and, this is key, interviewed. Not with questions necessarily, but with gestures, prayers, and a curious tap-tap motion involving a small gourd and your knuckles. This process is not about food inventory. It's about ritual integrity. Potatoes must align with the agricultural calendar. Any rogue spud growing eyes before its time? Suspicious. One turning mushy too early? Omen. A potato that remains unchanged year after year? That's not laziness. That's prophecy. Mainstream historical fact. In certain Andean communities, surplus. Potatoes, especially those used in ceremonies, were kept in state-controlled storage facilities. These were often dry, elevated spaces where officials would monitor their condition. Priests or designated custodians would examine these stored goods regularly, not just for rot, but for alignment with seasonal expectations. The idea wasn't just to preserve food, but to observe it. Today, you're promoted from assistant to full audit observer. First, you're handed a tally stick, its notches representing various qualities: firmness, color, dryness, sprouting, and emotional energy, which is apparently a thing now. You watch as the first sack is opened. A dozen potatoes tumble out, long, thin, speckled. Each is turned in the hand, sniffed, then held up to the early morning light. One is declared confused. Another is ready for rest. A third is so perfectly symmetrical that it's placed on a small cloth altar and anointed with smoke. You mark a line on your stick. Tap, tap. Next. Some are cracked, some have grown tiny whiskers. One has the distinct shape of a llama, and no one comments on it because it clearly knows. Quirky tidbit. Oral traditions include stories of potatoes that rebelled against harvest, tubers that refused to rot, or sprouted underground paths that led to buried treasure, or worse, secrets. One famous tale speaks of a potato discovered during an audit that hummed faintly at night. The village debated for weeks before deciding it was the reincarnation of a long-lost timekeeper and should be offered its own hut. You don't find any singing potatoes. But one does seem to squish when you look at it too hard, and that's enough to get it quietly moved to the soak and release basket. The elders work with hypnotic precision. You fall into rhythm, lay out, examine, tap, turn, nod, mark. Over time, the piles grow smaller. The air smells like dust, tradition, and faintly toasted starch. Historians still argue whether these audits were purely symbolic or formed part of an empirical tracking system. One theory suggests that potato audits prefigured modern biosurveillance in crop cycles, priests gathering data not in ledgers but in shared memory, whispers, and collective sensation. Around midday, the audit reaches its final subject: an unassuming, medium-sized tuber wrapped in llama wool. It's placed reverently on the stone platform. Everyone goes silent. It's the archive potato. No, really. That's what they call it. Wrapped and stored for 20 years, it's believed to hold the encoded essence of previous audits, its condition acting as a summary. It is not to be peeled. It is not to be eaten. It is only to be smelled, weighed, and very gently bounced. The priest lifts it, weighs it in his hands. He sniffs, frowns. He bounces it once. Everyone leans forward. It lands with a dull thud. That is not ideal. He places it down and begins a low hum. The others join in. It's not panic. Just concern turned into ritual noise. You're told this means the year ahead will be unpredictable. Not bad. Just bendy. You note it on your stick. Archive potato. Mood uncertain. And just like that, the audit is complete. The potatoes are blessed, rearranged, and covered again in protective cloth. One by one, the elders rise. Their joints creak. One gives you a quiet pat on the shoulder. "You did well," he says. "Your tally stick is tucked into your belt like a badge of office." You feel oddly proud, not just because you kept up, but because, for a few hours, you were helping the year make sense, helping potatoes fulfill their narrative. You walk outside. The sky is clear. The sun is finally high. And in the wind, you swear you hear something? A whisper? A hum? No. Just the sound of well-counted time settling back into place. It's nearing the end of your stay in the village, though time has melted into such a warm, mashed rhythm that it's hard to say how many days you've actually been here. The priest knows. Of course he does. He knows everything. When to plant, when to sing, when to poke a potato and say, "This one's lying." Today, however, he doesn't say anything at all. Instead, he hands you a shovel. That's right, a shovel, and a long, weather-worn map drawn on thick, grainy bark. It's more of a story than a map, filled with doodles of mountains and rivers, animals, and, most importantly, small spiral icons. Each spiral marks something called a Taitankapuka, a father red, or as the priest loosely translates it, a hidden tuber vault. Yes, buried time. You're going on a potato excavation. The priest points to the hills beyond the terraces, then gestures toward the first spiral on the map. Time to dig. Mainstream historical fact, Andean communities, especially those in the highlands, often buried ceremonial offerings in pits, known as quatas, to align agricultural cycles with the earth's perceived hunger. These caches weren't just sacrifices, they were records. Some included tools, miniature clay animals, and yes, special potatoes preserved in layers of ash and herbs. These burials helped mark cosmic events, major seasonal transitions, or communal oaths. You hike up into the higher fields, the air sharpens, the wind plays games with your poncho, and finally, beside a crooked stone marked with ochre dots, you find your spot. You dig, the soil is firm but forgiving, rich, scented with life. After a few minutes, your shovel strikes something hard. You kneel, brush away the dirt, and find it, a small clay jar, lidded, sealed with wax and bound with thread dyed red and black. You lift it carefully. Inside, one potato, but not just any. Potato. This one's been pressed flat, like a sacred pancake, and carved with symbols, spirals, stars, and a pair of eyes. The priest examines it silently, then smiles. This, he says, was planted to mark the eclipse that never came. You blink, he explains. Years ago, villagers predicted a celestial event based on star movements and tuber behavior. They prepared for it with offerings and ceremonies. But the sky stayed clear. No shadow, no moon across the sun. Still, they buried the potato anyway, as a record of the non-event. Quirky tidbit. Across many cultures, missed prophecies weren't hidden. They were honored. The Incas were no exception. A failed eclipse, a rainstorm that arrived late, even a potato that sprouted backward, each was seen as part of the larger story. These off-script moments were documented not in books, but in burials, crafts, and song. The priest lets you carry the eclipse potato in a small woven cradle as you continue. The next site is deeper in the hills. You dig again. This time you uncover a stack of 3 flat stones arranged like a table. Beneath them, another jar. This one contains only ash and a single blackened tuber, barely intact. A label, carved into the stone, reads, Puka Sumak Koya. The Seo's beautiful elder burned. The priest sighs. A story he doesn't quite share only says, she was supposed to last longer. You nod, solemnly placing the jar into a new pouch. By the third excavation, you find your rhythm. Each buried vault becomes a conversation. Some hold only dust. One contains a potato carved into the shape of a foot. Another bears a spiral so deep it nearly cuts through. Each one marks time differently. Some full of hope, some of memory, some of regret. Historians still argue how literal these practices were. Were these tuber burials symbolic gestures, spiritual contracts with the land, or proto-ledgers tracking events over generations? Many agree they were all three: a record, a ritual, and a reminder that even in the high Andes, history wasn't just written in stone. It was buried in dirt, in starch, and in stories. As the sun begins to lower, your satchel is full, not of food, but of time. You return to the village, where a small crowd awaits. Elders step forward to examine each potato you've unearthed. One is held aloft and blessed. Another is passed from hand to hand, each person offering a word, a nod, or a sigh. Finally, the priest takes one, an ordinary-looking spud with a tiny crack down its center, and places it in your palm. "This one," he says, "is for you." You nod. You understand. Not every moment is recorded with grand gestures or monuments. Sometimes it's buried quietly, waiting to be found, to be held, to be remembered by someone who wasn't even there. And now you are part of the archive. The final morning arrives like a soft breath, cool, clear, and weightless. The village moves gently, as though it too knows this is the last day of your potato apprenticeship. No rush, no trumpets, just the warm hum of routine, a broom brushing, stone, a kettle sighing over coals, and the faint jingle of ritual beads on a sash being tied for the 100th time. You sit by the main fire with the priest. He offers you a cup of something warm, not quite tea, not quite soup, definitely potato-based. You've stopped asking. The sky is perfect, endless blue brushed with delicate clouds. Today, the priest tells you, is not for tasks. It is not for digging, weighing, counting, or interpreting squeaky rodents. Today is for reflection, which of course means more potatoes, but not just any. He walks with you to a small circular structure at the edge of the village. It looks like a hut, but the walls are covered in white clay, smoothed to a mirror-like polish. The roof is thatched tightly, with wind chimes made of carved bones and dried maize husks. Inside, silence. This is the time house. It's not a temple. It's a library, but no books, just potatoes. Mainstream historical fact. In several highland regions, ceremonial storage houses were used not only to preserve sacred goods, but as places of memory. Some functioned like shrines where elders would sit, speak aloud events of the past, and dedicate those stories to stored objects. Potatoes, because of their variety, longevity, and physical changes, became ideal mnemonic devices. You step inside. Dozens of potatoes line the walls, each placed on a shallow clay dish. Some are marked, some aren't. One is nearly powder, another is hard as a stone. The air is cool and dry. Dust motes float lazily. The priest hands you a cloth and motions for you to sit. This, he says, is the quietest hour. He begins to speak, not loudly, just enough for the potatoes to hear. He recounts a time when the rains came late and a woman carved prayers into 5 red potatoes. He tells of a child who hid a tuber beneath his bed to trap bad dreams, of an elder who, before passing, left, behind a single untouched spud, untouched because he said, not all time needs keeping. Each story is simple. Each one ends with a pause and then a touch, his hand gently resting on the potato being spoken to, as if thanking it. You're invited to try. You choose a small, smooth one near the corner. You don't know its name, its age, or its story. But you speak anyway. You talk about your arrival, your confusion, the mash theft, the guinea pigs, the moment when you believed a potato was whispering a bedtime joke into your wrist, and then you say nothing. You just breathe, touch it, and let the moment record itself. Quirky tidbit. In some Andean oral traditions, people believed stories could be passed not by writing, but by witnessing, that if something was said aloud in the presence of a listening object, it became part of that object's soul. Potatoes, due to their long storage life, were often chosen as keepers of such tales. Historians remain divided. Some say this was poetic symbolism. Others argue it was a sophisticated system of social memory, objects as anchors for oral history, preserving context, location, and emotion through communal ritual. Either way, you now understand. You walk the circle slowly, touching each spud gently, thanking it. Not because it did anything flashy, but because it remained. And in this world, remaining is a kind of miracle. As you leave the time house, the priest stops you. He presses one final potato into your hand, tiny, wrinkled, striped like a tiger's eye. He says nothing, just nods. You wrap it in cloth and place it in your pouch, already heavy with days and stories. It's time. Time to return. You walk back through the village, waving to the children, the elders, the priest who taught you how to listen, taste, dig, and occasionally run for mashed time justice. The air smells of smoke, corn, and faintly sweet rot, the fragrance of seasons folding into each other. You don't feel like you're leaving. You feel like you're being timed out, and that's okay, because the potatoes will remember, and now, so will you. And now, you rest. Your journey has come to its final ridge. The fields, the fire pits, the stone shadows, the guinea pigs with their ribboned wisdom. They're all quiet now, nestled under a blanket of soft night and cool mountain wind. Breathe in. Slowly. Let the weight of time fall away. You're no longer carrying hours or history, just drifting on the soft starch of memory. Let your thoughts unravel like smoke from an old fire. Let your body sink heavy and warm like a well-buried potato safe in the soil. Protected, dreaming, still. You did well. You listened. You wandered. You held tiny objects filled with big meaning. You passed every test, not because you were perfect, but because you were present. Now there is no more running, no more tapping or tallying or deciphering squeaks, just the silence between stories, the breath between seasons, and the sweet, earthy comfort of knowing that even the smallest thing, even a potato, can carry the weight of centuries. So close your eyes. Let the whisper of wind through ancient terraces rock you gently. Let time soften, and if you dream tonight, may it be of glowing gourds, singing tubers, and a long, slow walk home beneath a sky full of stars that never once hurried. Good night, timekeeper. Sleep well.